This is the A to Z podcast. Expert insights on leadership, business, real estate, investing, and growth.
Welcome to the podcast. Today, it's going to be about comeback. Whether you are right now feeling you are in a valley or in the wilderness and looking for opportunities to come out of that, or maybe you are experiencing setback, or maybe you are trying to reinvent or rebrand yourself. Whatever the case may be, you are in the right conversation because I invited Jake Thompson. He is the right person because he knows what it means to be on the passenger seat and then make a shift to be on the driver's seat and transform his lives. Today, we're going to talk about his experience, and also we're going to share some of the stories that he have had to inspire you, challenge you, and take you to the next level. Jake, I know how much busy you are. I appreciate you for coming here to share your comeback story.
Yeah, you bet. Excited to be here today and appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, you are the founder of Compete Every Day. You are a coach and a speaker, inspiring and empowering people around the world through your books, programs, and coaching. But I want to take you back to share with me and also with the audience how it all started. What did you feel when you were on the passenger seat? And what happened to jolt you out of that, to take charge of the wheel and transform your life?
Yeah, so I grew up wanting to have a career in and around sports. I pursued a master's at the University of Dallas so that I could go get my certification with the NFL. At the time, I was interning with a sports agency out of Austin, thinking more than anything, I was going to be the next Jerry Maguire. And spending a couple of years in that industry, I realized very quickly that's not what I wanted to do with the rest of my career. But unfortunately, it was 2008 when I got out. I had about 2 weeks left in grad school, left the agency, finished out my grad degree, and struggled to get a job. And so it was kind of that awkward spot that many of us have been in before, where we have too much experience for say, entry level or starting jobs, and we have not enough for managerial roles. And what I did is just kind of reached out to my network and said, hey, listen, here's my skill set. Here's what I've learned. Here's where I think I can add value to you. Can I help your organization? And what happened is one client would refer me to another and to another. And I found myself making some really good money living in the North Dallas, Addison area, going out every weekend with friends, building some fairly superficial relationships, and kind of just being miserable. Right. My bank account looked great, but my health had declined. I was probably 60 pounds heavier than I am now. We were partying every weekend, and I found myself really just kind of going through life instead of making the most of it. Ended up reading a book by a guy named Donald Miller called A Million Miles in 1,000 Years. And in the book, Miller talks about the power of story and how great movies, great books, great pieces of literature that have a story that is timeless, that we see, that we're drawn to, we want to be a part of, follows kind of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. And Miller makes the argument, so does a great life. And I remember reading that book and being very aware at that moment that the story I was writing sucked and I needed to write a new one. And so as someone who was a former athlete growing up, the easiest place for me to start was the gym. And so I went to the local 24-hour fitness down the street from my house and just started working out. I'd play basketball a couple days a week. I'd lift weights. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't worried about what everyone else is doing. I wasn't worried about what that person was lifting or how much better that person was at basketball. It was just, can I get better than I was yesterday? Can I lift a little more weight? Can I maybe make one more shot than I did yesterday? And over the next 6 to 8 months, physically, I changed. But more than anything, my mindset changed and how I started showing up, because I was truly in competition with myself. I spent months doing that. I was still running my consulting practice, but I was showing up very differently to those. I had the opportunity to work with some really large brands and companies, but I still wasn't fulfilled in that journey. And so the more I talked to people around this idea of how do you compete with yourself, the more I was encouraged to take a route and do something with it. And so eventually, after testing and trying things for months, my best friend, who was my roommate at the time, ended up recommending that I start with t-shirts. He said, look, there's a company out of Boston called Life is Good. Ironically, their logo is a stick figure guy named Jake. He was like, they've built a really cool brand and message over these 3 words. He said, I think your idea of competing every day with yourself could be one as well. And so I put some money into a couple of boxes of t-shirts and tank tops and started selling them out of the back of my car behind a CrossFit gym I just started going to. And everything started from there.
So you mentioned about the book by Donald Miller. I read his book. If that's the same author, I read a book by him, Story Brand. Is that the same author?
Yeah. So
Okay.
what's really interesting about Miller's career is one of his first books was a book called Blue Like Jazz, which was his own kind of faith, spiritual journey. A Million Miles in a Thousand Years that I read was his memoir of them turning that first book into a movie and what he learned working with directors in Hollywood and how that process went. And what happened is through his journey, they first created a program called Storyline, which was helping people kind of rewrite that life story. And then they started doing it for businesses, which is Story Brand, which is all that they do now. And so he's followed that same journey of what makes the brand and the businesses tell great stories that people want to be a part of, that they want to do business with. But it all started from a very personal perspective and personal part of his journey to get to this point.
You mentioned also about mindset. I would be very curious, and I'm sure some of my audience would be very curious about the mindset that you had when you were in the valley, when you were down there stuck. And since you are on both sides of the fence, you could be able to tell the difference between having a mindset when you're stuck and also having a mindset once you transform. Would you compare for us and shows us, because this is going to help people to understand where their mindset is, because if they don't make a shift in their mindset, it's impossible to make a shift physically and in terms of experience.
Yeah. So I think there were a couple of key aspects of the mindset and my internal narrative and journey that I think are helpful. The first is I was very much raised, not intentionally raised this way, but I adopted this mindset growing up that it was constantly me versus you. I was always in competition with someone else. I was always validating myself, finding my value, my worth in someone else, in that external validation. And so for a majority of my life, there was that aspect of it. And then when I started changing my life, it was an internal battle, right? It was the internal competition of, can I get better? Not, am I better than you? And so that was the first big one. I think the second one is one, and I'm very cautious to use the word valley during that phase of life, because I don't think I truly experienced valleys and pains until I was actually building the business. And anyone who's been an entrepreneur and has gone through that, like it took a real big toll based off some early obstacles I took on. And so before I started Compete Every Day, I could say, yeah, I was probably more of a passenger in aspects of my life. But I was honestly waiting for someone or something to change the situation, right? We are waiting for someone to open the door. We're waiting for the right job to fall in our lap. We're waiting for someone else to come and change our circumstances. And that mentality, that external locus of control, almost makes us a victim to life, right? Because we're hoping, we're wanting, we're wishing someone else will change our circumstances, instead of understanding that really the only person that has full power in changing your circumstances is you. You make the decisions, you take the actions, you're the ones that show up every single day and chip away at changing that life. And so for me, kind of the before was a little bit of the passivity, whereas the after was proactiveness. And it didn't fully go away. I can tell you that my first number of years in business, I was waiting for like a magic tipping point. Like I was thinking, like, if we just did this, if somebody just posted here, if some famous person picked us up and shouted us out, everything would change for the business. And in reality, the success in business is a lot of the ways success, kind of like going to the gym. You just chip away every single day. And then over time, you get to a point where you built the momentum and the habits and things start to move. But there's no magic moment, magic tipping point that changes everything. It's the culmination of thousands of small decisions you make every day.
Yeah, I agree with you. In terms of mindset, myself, I know when I was stuck, my mindset was always like you described, very reactive, hoping something will come and change me, or somebody will hand some support for me and I could be able to come out of that. It was very reactive. And like you said, it's like being on the passenger seat. But once you make a shift in your mindset, you start to be the rescuer of yourself. You start to say, you know what, nobody is coming. Hey, I have to take responsibility. I have to be active. I have to go out there and to risk it and willing to fail. One thing you mentioned, if in case some entrepreneurs may benefit from it, you said that the worst scenarios that you experienced, it began when you try to build. And I resonate with you, because when you were not building anything, yeah, you may have some setbacks, but they're not that challenging, easy. But once you start to build something, once you become an entrepreneur, that's when the real challenge, the real setbacks that you experience. Do you mind to give us some of the setbacks that you experienced, and how did you come back from those setbacks?
Yeah, I think, I think a lot of it had to do with just kind of a stubbornness to not quit. I think that's honestly it. So early, the reason I encountered the obstacles were self-inflicted. Early in the days of building the brand, I started to let my ego take lead over pursuing excellence. And what happens is when you care more about your ego, you care more about how you look than what you do to get better. And when we did that, we took on business debt. I was trying to build and make us look bigger than we actually were, and accumulating that. And anybody that struggled with any kind of debt, from business debt to student loans to credit card debt, and it's a mountain sometimes that feels like you can never dig out of. It constantly weighs on you and stresses on you. And there was a point when later into building Compete Every Day, we'd been coming off one of our biggest years. Everything was looking perfect. And I started to look at the opportunity of building what the business looks like now, which majority of my work right now is as a keynote speaker and a leadership performance coach. And so I work predominantly with organizations in a handful of industries as a keynote speaker. But then we also do actual training on site with teams to develop their leaders and develop their executives. But early days, we were just apparel. And so when I started making this shift and started looking at maybe pulling at this thread of changing the business, I kind of went all in on it. And what happens is when you go all in on a new path, you take your eye off of what's benefited you and what's building your business. And so our apparel sales, our merchandise sales dropped pretty dramatically for a few reasons that year. And we found ourselves in a pretty tight hole. I had to skip my own paycheck for a couple of months, just trying to make sure our contractors and vendors were paid before having to cut some of those contracts. We were in a constant state of rolling cash, just trying to barely stay ahead while not being able to pay off business debt. And I got to a point where I had credit card companies calling me because I couldn't pay the bill. And I remember one of my darkest moments, I talk about it in my upcoming book fairly well, of just having a complete breakdown and at my kitchen table. And it's that moment of not only have I failed because I've made a big gamble and big decisions that haven't paid off as quickly as I hoped. I mean, looking back, hindsight's 2020, it was the right move. It was absolutely the right move to make. But in the moment, it doesn't feel like it, and you don't know. And you couple that with when your identity is tied up in what you do versus who you are, and you fail at what you do, you feel worthless. You feel like a failure. You're overcome. And that's why it's really dangerous to allow your identity to be solely attached to what you do, what you achieve, what sport you play, what business you own, all of those things. Because if you lose that, you have a loss of identity. You go through despair, you crumble. And so for me, it was going through that season of toughness, but at the same time, it was the perfect training ground to practice what I preach. If I was going to say this works, if I was going to look at the evidence that says, hey, if you want to change your situation, you show up and compete. You look for little things every single day you do to stack. You don't dig the whole mountain in a day. You just dig a little bit, right? You don't run a marathon in 2 steps. You run a couple steps, you run a couple more, you hit a mile marker, you keep going. And so for me, it was that moment of I can't quit on this journey in this moment just because it's gotten really hard. I have to focus on what's in my control and start to dig my way out. And that's essentially what we did. And a lot of that, I've got to give credit to a buddy of mine, Jake Clear, who phenomenal guy. He's here on LinkedIn at New Benefits. But he took me out to lunch early in the days of Compete, like just, I don't know, 6 months into building the business back in 2011, and just ask how it's going. And I was like, man, it's tough. Like, I didn't realize how many $25, $30 t-shirts you got to sell to make a living, but it's a lot more than I thought I did. And he laughed. He said, good. Cause my wife and I were talking last night and like, you're stuck. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, think about it. Your brands compete every day. If it's going well, you keep competing. You don't become complacent. You don't take your foot off the gas, but man, if things get hard, you keep competing. Because if you're going to change your situation, it's on you. And so you can change the business. You can maybe change what you do, but like, you're married to this message until the day you die. Because if you ever quit, you tell everyone who believed in that message that it's a lie. And it's not a lie. And I know it's not a lie. And there's so much evidence that says this is the actual way. And so you're stuck. And I remember when he told me that at the time, I was like, man, screw this guy. Like, what are you doing? But in reality, he was spot on. Because the truth in the statement is, like, wherever you find yourself, the only way to make it better, regardless of whether it's good or it's terrible, is to show up and compete.
Yeah, I love, by the way, when you have this kind of people who tell you the truth, because many people, they don't want to offend you. They don't want to affect the relationship. That they don't tell you. They say it, they don't tell you. But the problem is you may not see it because we all have blind spots. Yep. Unless somebody comes to you and help you uncover the blind spots that you have, you won't grow. And yep. I feel lucky whenever I have this kind of people who are bold enough, who care about me, who tell me my blind spots. A couple of things that you said, which I want to dive a little bit deeper. One thing you mentioned with that, you forgot about what worked for you, especially in generating revenue, and that came back to bite you. Another thing you mentioned about was you didn't separate yourself from what you do, from your performance. And the third thing, which your friend brought up, was he showed you that, hey, you have to align with your brand. You have to align with your values. You have to stay committed. If it could be for months, for years. So let's start with the first one, which is, personally, I've had that experience. I remember when I was back home in Ethiopia, my hometown, Harar, there were things I did that helped me to come to the capital city, Addis Ababa, and succeed. I forgot some of those things when I was trying to come to the United States. The same thing when I moved from being a software engineer to start my business. The things that worked me in the past, I forgot about them, and I've only focused on how to go to the next level using some new methods, approach, and that backfired so many times. Still, one of the things I do in my time of reflection and meditation is, what are some of the things that worked for me in the past, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 5 years ago, a year ago, that worked for me, that I drop them now. And whenever I remember a couple of those things, I see improvement, immediate improvement, because I already did them. I know the result they gave me. I go out and apply them where I am, and it shows results. Can you expand on that one? The importance of always not to drop the things that worked for you while you are keep on advancing.
Yeah, I think it's probably human nature, right? We naturally grow and improve, and we start to forget some of the basics that got us there, regardless of whether we're talking about as a sales professional, you forget the basics of time blocking and how you prospect, to building a business. You forget some of those things because you get distracted, and distractions are quite common. And so I think the important aspects of that is to constantly be connected to your why, your purpose. It's to have wise counsel around you who will call you out when you do get off track, understanding that. And then the most important, I think, is to fixate on your inputs over your outcomes, right? We tend to focus on outcomes. Our ego's taking the lead because it's, how much have we achieved? How good are we? What do other people think? How much are we getting liked? How awesome are we? When you focus on your inputs, it's like, what am I doing today to get a little better? What am I doing today to make another sale? What am I doing today to build relationships? And so it's a constant pull, but that's also why you want to set yourself up and your environment, both physically and socially, to help you succeed in that area by having a constant reminder of, why do I do what I do, regardless of whether it's so I can take my kid to Disney World, or it's to build a future that my parents never had, or it's because you think you're on a mission to do something bigger than yourself. And then it's to have people around you who are willing to call you out if you get off track in that pursuit.
I love it. You have to be surrounded by people who compliment you. One of the wisdom that I learned is if you are trying to bring people who think like you, act like you, who have the same kind of style that you have, you're going to have a lot of blind spots. But if you surround yourself with people who have something that you don't have, it's likely that they could be able to complement you and help you and meet your needs without you thrown off or going far away from your goals. Let's cover the second one, which is about separating yourself from what you do. I've had that kind of challenges. Sometimes it's human nature, like you said, ego takes over and you associate what you do with yourself. And then what you do doesn't work, or when people reject what you offer, or when you don't have the ability to meet your goals, you immediately think that you personally, who you are at the deeper level, is failing or rejected or disappointed. It's very hard to separate, to be conscious about separating these two. In your case, how do you stay focused, focusing on the essence of who you are,
Yeah, I
than
think I was
allowing
going
yourself to be distracted by what you do?
Yeah, I think a big piece of it is diversifying your identity. So, how do you talk about yourself? Being intentional of doing that. It's finding more things to diversify your identity around, right? You've got, you can be a parent, you can be a coworker, you can be a manager, you can be a football player, you can do all of these things. And so when you start to add more things to who you are and more aspects of it and how you talk about it's really intentional. It's one of the reasons, I typically will, and I have for years, right? Introduce myself, I'm a speaker or a performance coach, or I was an entrepreneur, but now I'm pretty adamant about the chief encouragement officer. And I take that CEO role title very seriously because there's a lot of diversity to that. Like I could lose my vocal cords tomorrow and I'm not able to go keynote anymore. Does it mean I can't still encourage people? Of course not. I can write. I can figure out other ways to do it, right? And so having more flexibility in what that identity is. The other thing is just how do I introduce myself, right? I am a husband to Elena. I am a proud dog dad, which there are tons all around me here in this room. There's other aspects to who I am and what I like to do that I think are really important. And so the more you can be intentional about how you talk about yourself, how you introduce yourself, how you see yourself, is really vital because life always throws you curveballs. And I think there's a lot of people that can speak from experience of, for those of you that are parents, when your kids leave the nest, right? They graduate high school or they graduate college and they become adults. And there's a season of you're still a parent, but they don't need you anymore. And there's a loss of identity in that as a caretaker to a degree that you have to go with. It's no different than a startup CEO or a manager or somebody who loses their job, right? If that's all you saw yourself as, and that's where you found your value of solely being there, then you go through a depressive state, you go through a rough season because you've had a loss of identity. And there's always pain and discomfort around a loss of identity. You have it the last day you play a sport and when you move on from a job, because we attach a lot of ourselves to it. But the more diverse our identity is, the more ways we see ourselves beyond just what we do or that one thing, the more quickly you can recover and start to rebuild that narrative.
I love the example that you gave about yourself being a speaker. If you lose your voice, you can still be purposeful because your identity is not attached in what you do. And this reminded me of one of my colleagues. He was actually my mentor, and he was a trainer. He was traveling around the country, and one time he had this health crisis and he couldn't be able to travel because he couldn't be able to hold his bag, he couldn't be able to go to the airport. Most importantly, he couldn't be able to stand in front of people for 8 hours every day for 3 days, 2 days. He couldn't do it, and he was depressed and he lost his identity. He felt like life was over because he attached himself with what he does, which is training people. And we have to remind ourselves, and also with the ability to reinvent yourself. Like you said, if I'm not being able to train and travel, why not write? Why not raise other successors, mentor them? I don't need to be at the front, but this requires the ability to differentiate between what we do and who we are, and the ability to reinvent ourselves and develop new skills. I want to move on to talk about your approach, which I like. I know you're very active in terms of physically exercising, and you encourage people to do that, but you're not asking people to just do these grander things or mega things to change. Your approach is 1% improvement every day. Would you expand on your approach? Because if somebody is not resonating with you for various reasons, maybe their age doesn't allow them, or their health doesn't allow them, or they're not that kind of person who exercise like you do, they may not compete physically the way you do, but how can you help them to improve bit by bit to go to the next level and make a shift and experience transformation?
Yeah, so I always love to kind of preface that I love being active, right? For me, it's as much around my mindset and mental health as it is physical health. And I'm not the one that advocates that if you don't have a six pack, you can't be successful. I'll leave that for the bro space. But I do believe there's something to be said about investing in your health, not only because one, it helps you build discipline that carries over to other parts of your life, but it gives you the energy to show up, right? You would have a hard time listening to a keynote speaker or a leadership speaker on stage if they were disheveled, if they, where do you go? If they were like my guy, Matt Foley from Saturday Night Live, for anybody that is a Chris Farley fan, right? The disheveled guy that lives in a van down by the river. So there's something to be said about that. But I believe at the end of the day, it's just about making the difficult, consistent choices to become your best. So you then have the opportunity to bring your best to the people you care about. It's selfish to take the easy route. It's selfish to go through the motions because it's simple. It's easy. Most people do it, right? In order to achieve different, you have to do different. But what I am adamant about is doing it in small steps, right? So if you're listening to this, I'm not telling you to get out and go run a marathon. I'm telling you what would it look like if you walked around your neighborhood for 15, 20 minutes, right? You got some sunlight, you started moving. What would it look like if you started aiming to get 6,000 to 8,000 steps a day, and then you worked your way up to 10, right? What are the little deposits that you can make for change? Because what happens is most people try to go too big. It's like January every year. They come out of the gates, hair on fire with this big, vague goal, and they burn themselves out not even within 3 weeks. And the reason being is they've gone too big, they've gone too quick, or they've gone too vague versus stacking small, what we call Lego blocks. And the reason people don't do that is because it's too slow, right? We're used to Amazon delivering our order same day, next day. We want our goals delivered the same way, when in reality, it's what are the small steps, right? If you're somebody who you hear about the benefits of journaling and maybe meditation and clearing your mind, but you're like, man, it sounds like a lot. Start with just 3 bullet points every day. One thing you're grateful for, one thing you're excited about today, and one thing you want to be intentional about, right? Be a cup of coffee. You're excited to be on this podcast with AZ. And the one thing I want to be intentional about is being present here with you today and locked in on all my calls, right? Something simple like that. Or if you've never worked out, it's how can I just walk for 15, 20 minutes outside or on the Stairmaster, on the treadmill, right? It's the little things that stack over time, because we try to make life-changing moves in a month and give up when we don't, versus how do I make little bitty steps and change over the next year to 2 years to 3 years. And so those are the things I'm really kind of adamant about in this process is small steps, because they're attainable, right? We see from a research standpoint that people who celebrate small wins are 23% more productive than those who don't. And so those small wins incrementally build over time. And it's important for us to look and build for those small things so that we keep going versus burning ourselves out.
I love it. I love it. Personally, I'm a big picture guy, ambitious, and I always want to do great things. One thing I learned is that whenever you have big goals, and if you don't know how to break them down, if you don't know how to bite size your your plan, you will be overwhelmed. Now, what I
Yep.
do is every week I come up with, okay, what are the top 5 things I should do this week? And I spread them throughout the week. And every day I have a couple of things I have to do about those top priorities. That's my focus. After that, I can do other things. That helped me a lot. Exercise wise, if I have a good weather, unless it's raining or unless it's too bad, I always go out on a daily basis to make sure that I exercise. And while I'm walking, you might have read the book by James Clear, which is Atomic Habits, which is
Yep.
personally, I don't really like to exercise, but I stuck exercising with other habits. For example, I love reading books, and while I'm taking walk and exercising, I'm listening to audiobooks, podcasts, and motivational speeches, documentaries, and so on. Whenever I go to the gym, I'm telling myself, hey, I'm not going to the gym. I'm going to listen to my favorite book. I'm going there just to watch this video or to listen to this podcast. And therefore, my mind is tricked. I'm going to the gym, but while I'm exercising, I am enjoying being there because I start some of my habits. From your perspective, in terms of chunking down and making small improvements, what are some of the tools or approaches or strategies that you use that helps you to make improvements that are not overwhelming? If you also have some resources that could help them, I just mentioned James Clear, which is Atomic Habits, that could help a lot of people to have these little habits and stack them together to make sure that they could be able to see improvement, especially in the areas where they don't like making improvements.
Yeah. So one of the first ones I actually included in my first book, Compete Every Day, we call the scorecard, and you can get one for free. It's jakeathompson.com/scorecard. Feel free to grab it there, but essentially it helps you to break down and walks you through the process to build 5 to 6 daily habits. You can do them work focused. You can do them life focused. You can blend it in, but the key in it is every day you're going to check the box. And so you're visibly going to see the days you hit the mark and the days you didn't. And it changes the dynamic when it's in your face, the streak you have going positively or negatively. Second piece is I would tell everybody, just get an accountability partner. Ask a friend, tell the friend, hey, I want to start walking 4 days a week after work or at lunch. Will you hold me accountable to it? And there's a really easy and free app called Habit Share that you can use to utilize that. You just add a friend on there and say, Aziz, my friend, I want to start this habit every day of walking. Then I'm going to add it in here. And then when I check the box or I X the box, so if I get it or I miss it, it sends him a notification. And so then he can see the streak of, oh man, Jake's hit 3 days in a row, or Jake's been 0 for 3. So then I can follow up with that and say, hey, what's going on here? And so those are really key moments to be mindful of is have something where you can visibly see the progress. And then at the same time, you want to have somebody who can hold you accountable in that process to see that you're going to follow through with it.
Jake, I'll be very much interested, and I believe my audience too, to know some of your high performance habits. When I study high performance, you are one of them. They have these maybe a couple of important habits that they do on a daily basis that make the difference for them to be effective and successful. Would you mind to share those high performance habits that you have that are empowering and helping you succeed?
Yeah, I think for me, it's move every day, learn every day, and review every day. I think those are the big ones, right? If I can learn, move, and review, I'm in pretty good shape. So when I talk about move, it's working out at some kind of movement. Some days it's mobility and yoga. Some days, like today, it's getting up and hitting the gym in a morning class. But every day I need to do something for my physical body. On the learn side, I'm reading. Typically, I'm reading first thing in the morning for 10 to 15 minutes. I separately will have a fiction book at night before bed, but I'm always reading something leadership, psychology, sales in the mornings or at lunchtime. And on occasion, when I have days where I'm on the go, like this week, I'm flying to Iowa for a workshop program for a client, I'll listen in a podcast in the back of an Uber. And so I'll sit in there and throw on the podcast. And so I'll have 20, 30 minutes of listening to an audiobook or a podcast. So I'm learning something every day and looking for ways to apply it. And then the last is review. Getting to the end of the day and asking myself, what did I do well today? And what do I want to do better tomorrow? And then setting my agenda for tomorrow. Most of us, we have a to-do list like I do. I love the app Todoist, but I have a million things on there. And a million things are not my priority. So I always go in at the end of a day and look at the list and say, okay, here's everything left over from today. What are my top 3 priorities for tomorrow? Looking at the list and looking at my calendar and looking at my goals. And then just really quickly reorder things, set specific times tomorrow where I'm going to work on today's objectives, and move forward. And so I think if you get in a process every day of moving, of learning and reviewing each day, what did I do well? What do I want to do better tomorrow? And then setting tomorrow up for success, you're going to week over week compete with yourself and guaranteed to get better.
Move, learn, and preview on a daily basis. I would say I practice them, but I struggle. For example, moving. Now I move on a daily basis. At least I do some stretching, some push-up. I walk. I go to the gym. At least one of this, and also I learn on a daily basis. This one is habit. I didn't struggle. I get up early morning. The first thing I do, I want to reflect. I want to meditate. And I want to read 1 or 2 chapters, and I'm going to take maybe 30 minutes, an hour, depending on my schedule, to write something towards a book or a blog or a program. I am disciplined on that one. The preview one that I struggled a lot because I may review myself in the morning, just going back what I did yesterday. At the end of the week, on a Sunday afternoon or evening, I go back and preview and review what I have done, what worked, what didn't work. But I realized that this is too far. Once per day and once per week, I thought this is not enough. And one of the things I do is I have an alarm on a daily basis to stop me, whatever I'm doing 3 times, late morning, late afternoon, and around 9 p.m. And when I get the alarm, it reminds me just to stop. Sometimes I catch myself highly agitated or stressed or like overwhelmed. And I say, I don't need to be like this. And I stop myself and see my emotions and calm down. Or sometimes I'm not grateful enough. And I say, now let me be grateful. I'm healthy. I'm this and that. Why don't I be grateful? Sometimes I see myself doing something that's not really adding value. That's not taking me to the next level or serving a greater good. And I stop what I was doing because of that preview, because of that alarm. And I love that. And we should have a way to make sure that we have such habits that's going to help us on a daily basis. Otherwise, we'll be distracted or overwhelmed, or we may catch ourselves doing some stuff that are nothing to do with the main thing.
Very much. And I think, just having even the habit, I tell people to do that if you struggle with like drinking water, right? Set an alarm a few times throughout the day to get up out of your desk and go get some water, just to help you reset and catch you when you might be in a groove, when you might not be in the right headspace, going from there.
Yeah, I love that. I have a sticker on my refrigerator which says drink a lot of water. And when I come to my refrigerator, I see the drink a lot of water. I stop everything I do. I go and drink a glass of water because we have so many things to do. And unless we have some signposts, reminders, alarms, we won't be able to preview and make sure that we are on top of things. Yep. From your experience, if in case there are some habits that may benefit other people who may not resonate with, they resonated with me, I'm doing them. But if in case, if there are people who may not resonate with these habits that you and I share, are there any common habits of high-performing people? I can mention one of the habits that I have seen people who are high performers is they get up early morning. And because they get up early morning, in most cases between 5 to 6, they could be able to achieve the most important tasks the first few hours. Sometimes they go to play golf around 11 and people don't understand what they're doing. They did the tough, the most important things, early morning hours, and then they go relax, maybe connect with people, network with people, and maybe go back again early afternoon or something like that. Can you add a little bit more habits that may resonate with some people?
I mean, we kind of hit the big key ones, right? It's being intentional to set your day in your calendar. It's being physically active and improving your health. It's learning, reading, listening to a audiobook, consuming something that you can put into practice. It's having times to reset mentally. Like it's not there's not a secret pill. And that's the reality of it, right? They're very simple to do, as Darren Hardy would say in the book The Slight Edge. Like, or Jeff Olson, like they're just as easy not to do. And the reason people dismiss them is because it seems too simple on the surface. If I wake up early, if I intentionally set my calendar and my priorities the day before, if I work out and move my body, if I learn something every day, it's not going to change your life tomorrow. It will change your life if you do it every day over the next 6 to 12 months. And so that's kind of the reality of it. There's a number of other things that different people do, right? Some people love cold plunging and sauna, which I do, but I don't think you have to do that to be a high performer. There's certain people that'll journal for 30 minutes in the morning. I don't think you have to do that, but I do think having a journaling habit just to practice gratitude and get some of your thoughts out are helpful. Some people are runners. Like they believe in, you got to be a runner to be in this standpoint. Really, at the end of the day, you're looking for things that help prime your mind, that build your discipline and help you set intentionality.
I agree with you. There are extreme habits. One of the habits that I don't think I should do and I don't recommend, which I heard from one high performer. He's the CEO of one of the 500 Fortune companies, and he said that he does these risky sports like flying and doing, aeroplane jumping, some risky sports. And part of the reason he does that is because it takes him out of his comfort zone. It challenges him to think big and to take risks, stuff like that. But you're right. All of these habits that you shared, many of them are easy to do. They don't cost anything. They don't require a lot of taking risk or a lot of work. Let's talk about one of the things I love about what you do, which is you encourage people to compete on a daily basis, but you're not saying compete with the world. You're not also saying compete with other people. I'm guilty of this because the way we're wired, some of them could be genetical. Some of them could be the way we're raised in our family and also in our subculture, and also schools. Think about schools. The schools, they grade us and they compete us. They reward people who come top. This is kind of very close to home because we always want to compete with other people. But you are advising and encouraging people, hey, compete with yourself, not with the world. Would you please expand on that and give us some examples from your experience?
Yeah. So I'll preface this, right? You're always in competition with other people, school, but I mean, that's business, right? Business, you're competing against other businesses. As a podcast, you're competing with other podcasts for eyeballs and attention. There's always external competition. The problem is most everybody is putting their worth and their value in that external competition, right? In the outcomes that are beyond their control. And there's four types of competitive mindsets that psychologists have kind of decided on. There's the people that avoid it altogether. They want no part of it. I kind of call these people, for lack of a better phrase, the lazy ones, because they're not setting goals. They're not doing it. They're just kind of going through life. They have no aspirations, no desire to improve, no way to push themselves, none of that. So I kind of put them over here to the side because they're not competitive at all. You have what we would call the dominators, which are psychologists classify as the hyper competitive ones. They're the people who they constantly seek external validation, right? If they make more money, if they have more sales, if they win the championship, like they need that to validate themselves. And on the surface, they sound really good. But this is the same person who's hyper competitive in the workplace and then goes home and flips Monopoly boards with their 7-year-old because their 7-year-old beats them, right? They throw a video game controller. They can't handle losing because they see it as a shot on their self-worth. And so what happens a lot of times with these people is they want to compete, but they only want to compete in things that they're going to win. And they go after safer goals and smaller goals. On the same kind of vein as that, you have the people who would essentially be considered perfectionists. They won't get into competition unless they're 100% ready, confident, and perfect. If they mess up, it's a shot on their identity and worth. So similar to the externally validated, they are the perfectionist. And so they have to do it where they look perfect. And so all of these are, we all have in aspects of this done this, but the healthy, the most positive ones are the ones intrinsically motivated. They compete knowing, hey, I may mess up, I may not win, but I'm going to get better and I'm going to learn something about myself. And I see this as a growth opportunity. And that's really what we're challenging people to do. You need other people in a sales atmosphere. Having other people around you and a leaderboard is healthy. So you're constantly pushing each other to raise the bar. There's something about that competitiveness when you have a teammate and you have a person who pushes you to be better than you were. That's the ancient Greeks believed in this concept of eros and how excellence was revealed through competition. Other people pushing you helped reveal what you were actually capable of. The problem is when we put and attach our worth to that outcome that's beyond our control, we get into an unhealthy shape. We use comparison in a very negative aspect. We have all these things. So we advocate for this idea of put your confidence and your worth in how you compete, how you show up, how you strive. What are your inputs that are 100% in your control every day? So it's not the sales numbers, but it's the calls you're making every day, the prospects you're having conversations with, the people that you're studying and learning from, right? Those are the things, because those are the things that stack over time to create good outcomes, right? In the gym, it's not the number on the scale, right? And that's what most people do. It's, did I lift today? Did I drink my water today? Did I eat healthy today? I'm focusing on my inputs because the outputs and the outcomes take care of themselves over time. And so that's what we advocate for. And I'm so adamant about, because I've done it wrong. And I know mentally the kind of problems it puts you in when you're constantly seeking validation and competing with others. But make no mistake, I absolutely love getting on a basketball court or getting in sports and competing with people, because it allows me to see, how do I measure up? Where are there holes in my game? Where do I get exposed? What are areas I need to improve in so that I get better the next time? But then all of my focus goes into, what am I doing to improve myself?
Yeah, I love it. This is a little bit complex, but it's very simple. A little complex because we humans, we have to compete. There is an urge inside, but we have to figure out, we have to compete, but we should not really put our identity on the line. And if we're not winning, we should not lower ourselves. But I want to bring up something and I want to hear from you, which is, for example, in the past, if you hear someone getting award, for example, being the top student or the top entrepreneur or the top sport person, you hear it on TV, on radio, and it could be at the end of the year. The challenge today that we have is on a daily basis, second by second, you see people on social media, people who are having a lot of likes, for example, engagement and comments, and you don't have. You see some people showing the success that they have, the car they have, the plane that they have. And on a daily basis that you are comparing yourself with others. And it's overwhelming. And I sympathize people. I struggle, but I have a way to handle that one. One of the ways I handle, I want to hear yours. One of the ways I handle that is I have a long view. A long view means, for example, I have a podcast. I started it a couple of months ago. I didn't get the kind of engagement I wanted or the likes and the shares. But my goal was not to make this podcast, let's say, as one of the podcast, successful podcasts within 1 year or within 6 months. That didn't have that goal. So I'm not stressing out. I do my best to bring people who could inspire my audience. I keep on doing it. Maybe the next 3 years, the next 5 years. That's maybe when I may have a podcast, which could have a lot of engagement and likes. Because I have that perspective, what happens is that even if I'm not meeting my goals, even if I want to go to the next level with my podcast, I'm not stressing out, I'm not discouraged, I'm not stopping. I keep on giving, I keep on doing it because I have a long view. How do you help, especially young people who are competing on a daily basis because of the season where we are, which is social media?
Yeah, so I think the first step is kind of understanding what's the game you actually want to play, right? If you're comparing yourself to other stuff on social media, that's a very dangerous game because a lot of people are hacking the system in a way that's not authentic, right? It's the person that goes from 1,000 followers to 100,000 followers in a week. That's not legit. Yet we compare ourselves because we see they have 100,000 followers, not the fact that they get 5 likes and 1 comment. So I think understanding that social media is not real. And despite all of the seeing on it, it's not real, and realizing what matters in the real world. Because to your point, there's business owners and businesses that have small followings that rake and they do really well. And there's people that have hundreds of thousands of followers and they don't. And so understanding first and foremost that. Second is getting clear on what's the game you want. What's the game you want to play? Who are you in comparison with, right? You may be in comparison because you see that person got an award, but you wouldn't trade your family or personal life or health for them. You just want the award. You don't want everything else that comes with it. And so when it comes down to that, well, no, I don't want to sacrifice the people in my life that matter most just to have that. So you got to get really clear on what's the game you want to play. And then 2, you need to have better boundaries and relationships with things like social media that start to pull you in. If you can't get on LinkedIn without immediately scrolling your feed and having negative thoughts of unhealthy comparison and going down that rabbit hole, then what you need to do is create a bookmark that when you go on LinkedIn, you go immediately to your profile. You don't go to your feed. And then you go from there to prospects or people you're trying to connect with and you message them and you don't get in your feed and you don't spend your time. It's having boundaries and accountability in that regard. And then last, it's understanding when you start to hear the warning signs, you start to feel that negative pull, is to reset by stepping back and saying, is this the game I even care about playing? What is the game that matters? And then am I feeling triggered because it's about my ego or pursuing excellence? And if it's about excellence, then let me look. What did that person that won that award do? What can I learn from them? If they're on my team, right? How can I study them? Is it their social media strategy? Is it their sales prospecting? Is it how good they deliver on stage? What is the case of what they're doing well that I need to learn from and see how I apply it? And so that's kind of the process. Comparison is always going to be there. There's no escaping it. But what you have to do is set boundaries and get clear on what game you actually care about winning and playing, and then focus solely on that.
Yeah, I love these contextualizations that you provided because we're humans, we want to compete and it's normal to compete. But once we have the context, we make sure that we're not taking it over and affecting us. One thing I want to emphasize about what you said is if you really take something seriously, if it matters to you, and if there are other people who are better than you, rather than being jealous, rather than being dejected, why not learn from them? This is important to you. You see that they are succeeding, they are getting award, they're getting better, and it's important to you. Rather than competing unproductively, what you could do is, you know what? They are successful. This is important to me. Let me learn from them and become better. That's very healthy competition, which delivers result. Before we finish, like we have 7 minutes, before we finish, I want to talk about your ability to build a brand. When you start with shirts, t-shirts in your car. Today, you inspire people globally. And just for the people who may not know, you have a designation, CSP, which is Certified Speaker Professional, which is one of the top designations if you are a public speaker. This brand that you have today, compete every day, it's a global brand. You are inspiring people around the world through your products, services, coaching, and program. But it started with selling shirts. Can you tell us about how you built your brand and what are some of the things that you used that helped you to build your brand so that other people could be able to learn from you and do the same?
Yeah, so I think the brand compete every day is connected to me, but it's really the message and the ethos of everything we're trying to do. And so for us, it's all about storytelling and how we can both use the storytelling to motivate and educate people on it, And then in an offline sense, we try to look for every interaction, whether it's me on stage, whether it's our podcast, whether it's our handwritten thank you cards that we drop in every order that ships out from our store, of looking for ways to reinforce that encouragement, education, and motivation. And so that's it, right? It's a lot of times it's been testing and experimenting and figuring out what's worked and doing a lot of things that haven't worked over the years, but staying true to the idea that we want to help people compete every day with themselves and equip them with the right resources or tools or skills to do that. And then provide them that motivation and encouragement along the way to show up consistently, because it's the everyday aspect of that brand message that's the difficult one to apply.
I love the way how you built your brand, which is authentic, and these are very helpful for people who want to build their brand. Before we finish, do you have any last minute word or message? And also, how can people find you to learn more? I know you have a lot of things to offer. 1 hour here is not enough to get more from out of you, but how can people find you somewhere to get and learn more about you?
Yeah, best place to connect. Website is competeeveryday.com. You'll find links to both of my books. My third book, which is available right now for pre-order, is a fable, a design for youth athletes, their parents, coaches, and teams. It's called The Extra Inch. You'll find links to the podcast, and then my social media. I'm most active on LinkedIn or Instagram, and my username on both will be Jake Thompson Speaks.
Thank you very much, Jake, for coming. Everyone who watched this conversation, we got a lot out of this conversation. Go to LinkedIn, go to social media. Jake is available. He shares posts, and also go to his website to learn more. Until I see you next time, keep moving, and thank you very much for watching. Bye.